Hello and welcome to this episode of the Game Plan Podcast by College Baseball Advisors. On this podcast, we try to unpack all things as it relates to various levels of baseball, from skill development to the mental game to the recruiting process at all levels: high school, college, minor league, and pro. My name is Wayne Mazzoni. I'm your host. I coached college baseball for 30 years and now run College Baseball Advisors. For more information about what I do, please visit my website, collegebaseballadvisor.com. On today's episode, we had Tad Skelley, head baseball coach at Vassar College, and we covered his really cool background from playing at Wheaton to working at Notre Dame and Northwestern. Also, Colby College was the head coach at Gordon and has now been at Vassar since 2023, excuse me. Really covered a lot of stuff, of course, about his background and his approach on coaching, but also talked a lot about Vassar, high academic Division III schools, the recruiting process, and the culture and roster at a school like his. So it was really, I thought, very informative. I'd like to remind you that today's episode is sponsored by the Mohegan Sun World Baseball Coaches Convention, which is in his 23rd year. This year, it's January 15th to 17th, 2026, at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut. A great event with great speakers, breakout rooms, vendors, batting cage, infield demo space. It's a really awesome event. I've been to it at least 20 times. If you go to baseballcoachesclinic.com, you can see more information on this year's speakers and also on the schedule. And for those that register, you also get video access to all of the speeches, which is great because obviously when you're there in person, you can only go to so many because they run simultaneously. So that's part of the registration. So again, please visit baseballcoachesclinic.com. And without further delay, here is my conversation with Tad Skelley, head baseball coach at Vassar College. All right, Tad. So you and I have traded a number of messages and communications for quite a while now, but this is like our
Yeah.
real first exciting interaction here. So to me, it's just a conversation between two baseball guys that we're recording, and other people can jump in on. So I'm going to ask you one question I always ask everybody, and one I've never probably asked anyone, although you've probably gotten it. You're the only Tad I've ever known. So, so what's the story behind Tad? Is it on the birth certificate? Is it a nickname?
Yep.
How did it come about?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so it is. It is on the birth certificate. So I was actually named after my uncle who had passed away before I was born. So my mother's brother. And so, that's why typically people think that it's, Thaddeus or something longer, and it's not. It's Tad, it's TAD. So I've met probably five or six others, and
There's not a convention or a meeting anywhere, is there, of you guys?
I don't think it would be a big one. I don't think it would be a big one if it was. So,
Yep.
but no, yeah,
That's
yep.
funny because what you just said is interesting because I'm Wayne Aldo Mazzoni. So I'm
Okay.
Italian, but my mom's brother, my uncle Wayne, was in Vietnam when I was born, and he's like, I don't think I'm making that here. So they threw a bone,
Oh
and
man,
he's still alive and kicking. And
that's awesome.
I mean, I don't know any Waynes like below like 45.
Yeah.
So we have that in common. And I'm going to take a stab because I couldn't find this in any research. Were you born and raised in Mass?
No, so New
Oh,
Hampshire.
okay. Oh, New Hampshire. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Wolfboro, New Hampshire, which is a small resort town in New Hampshire on Lake Winnipesaukee, and but yeah, that's where I grew up. My family's still there. My parents are still there. So yeah, Wolfboro.
So it's interesting too. My big passion outside of sports and family and dog is nature and hiking. And only I'd say like the last 10 years I've gone up towards
Yeah,
that way.
yeah,
New Hampshire is just unbelievable. It is
yeah. It's
just
awesome.
absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, it
Yeah, it's
really is.
awesome. It's my wife and I always get pulled back there. Like we just the summers or any opportunities we get the holidays, which are coming up obviously, and any chance we get to go back, and we have two little girls, and my both my siblings have young families, so we're always trying to get back to New Hampshire as often as we can, which never feels like enough, but it is just an awesome place.
And this is something you've also probably gotten. You mentioned wife and two girls,
Yeah.
but you could pass for a junior in high school, right? So I'm not the first dude to tell you that, but you're quite the young,
So
and
I'll
you have a
I'll give
great
you a
baseball
funny
background.
story. We one of our current freshmen, um, when I met his father, uh, he shook my hand and thought I was one of the guys, thought I was one of the players, and his son, and so I said it to his son, and he was like, "My dad's such an idiot," and I said, "Nope, it's not the first, and it won't be the last time. I know if I'm the first person getting off the bus, I'm sure most other teams don't think that that I'm the head coach, and
Right.
um, hopefully when I'm 60, hopefully I'll look like I'm 40. That's my hope.
Well, it's funny you say that because I remember back in my day when I was coaching and clean shaven and younger, I would get confused for a player. And then at some point that disappears and you'll go, man, I liked it when people thought I was a player. You
That's what
know?
I'm worried about.
Yeah. Um, so growing up in that area, where you did, obviously everyone on this podcast is a baseball guy,
Yeah.
growing up, but what other sports and things were you involved in, growing up, either, junior high, high school age? Were you playing other sports too?
Yeah, so I was a three-sport athlete. I played football and hockey as well, and um, both my siblings. I'm the youngest of three. We're all 4 years apart. My brother played hockey at St. Lawrence. My sister played field hockey at University of New Hampshire, and all three of us were three-sport athletes. That's how we were raised, and we I think we're big believers in that, and trying like heck to continue that with our all of our kids. And I think it's a lot more challenging now, but
Totally.
but we're trying, and I'm a big believer in that. And but yeah, I played all three all the way up through my senior year in high school. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, this time of year on social media, you see a lot of, maybe you guys do it too, but you do see a lot of the D1s. They do sort of their, like the fall season's over, the individuals are over, and they're into this like almost Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
funny watching the baseball players play volleyball or floor hockey or
Yeah.
dodgeball. Like they love it, man. It
Yeah.
just goes to show how we're wired
Yep.
to do different things and
Yep.
compete in different things, you know?
Yep. Yep. And I mean, I'm sure everybody said it on here, but we're always better for it. And and I feel every angle of it, like, as a coach, you want to push it, you want to support it. As a parent, I think most parents want to, and I'm sure you experience it, but like you just get pulled, and my oldest is 10, and we're getting pulled in different directions of you want to feel like, hey, you can do all three, but it's becoming harder to do them unless it's a travel program, and the travel program requires so much time, and so you're gonna miss, and how do you choose which one? And it used to be, hey, if you're in season, like that's gonna get the priority, and it's becoming harder and harder. So it's kind of a crazy age of sports and youth sports. I just saw a thing on TV about how, private equity, right, is like kind of taking over youth sports and what
Mm.
that's creating. And um, but three sport athlete, is those kids. If I could have a full team of them, I think we'd be pretty good.
Yeah, I agree, and I've it's come across on most of these ones that I do, but I do, as you alluded to, I do understand the pressure on if we're talking baseball. Your
Yeah,
standard high school sophomore junior is feeling pressure to develop in baseball and to play one sport.
yeah,
I do enjoy when I hear whether it's their high school coach or their travel coach that supports the other sports, like, hey, I hope this is your top sport, but if you want to
yeah,
go and you got to miss other things to do other sports,
yeah,
that's fine. I hate when they get pressured into, if you're not here every single second, you might as well just give it up. And that's when the kids are put in a tough spot, you know.
yep, yep, 100%.
Back to you. When was it, I assume in your high school career at some point you realize you were best at or getting interest in? Like what led you to, or when did you realize, hey, I'm going to go the baseball route for college?
Yeah, I think it was probably my junior year. Um, I jokingly tell people I forgot to grow, and I think it certainly ruled out football. And I think maybe there could have been an opportunity with hockey, maybe an opportunity to do both hockey and baseball. But I think that, with how physical hockey is, you know, there's only so many Brad Marchands of the world,
Right.
um, and I think baseball started to take over, and for whatever reason, it kind of grew into the number one passion too. Um, and so, I felt like my brother did the hockey thing, and that was his path, and my sister was field hockey, and it just kind of seemed like it made sense, baseball, and so that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, and it's funny as you were saying the two sport thing. I've had a number of people do the two sports. Hockey seems at the college level,
Yeah,
especially, almost impossible. Somehow maybe doable, but with the way the hockey season
yeah,
goes, it
yeah,
can be really, difficult.
mhm,
Wheaton has come up a lot on this podcast through a lot of, it's a lot. I mean, listen, Pobelski ran just a tremendous
yeah,
program for a very long time.
yeah,
Happy for him that he's kind of taken a new opportunity at Brown. But
yeah.
um, what were the factors in choosing Wheaton for college?
Yeah, well, my older cousin went to Wheaton and played for Coach Podbelski, and he was um, probably 7 years older than me, and he was really there for the start of Wheaton baseball. So he played with Jesse Woods from Colby,
Yeah.
and they were really the ones that I think established the foundation that I got to be a part of. But for me, it was I really wanted to be a part of a winning culture, and I wanted to be at a place that was going to value winning alongside getting a. I wanted to be at a liberal arts school, and I didn't want to be at a big school. I preferred New England or the Northeast, and so it's just kind of like you start checking the boxes, and I went to prep school. I went to Holderness School, and um, I think I had just gotten a cell phone, maybe like my junior year, and um, but Coach Podbelski, we had a landline at the end of the hallway, and it was every Monday night at 8 o'clock or whatever it was. It would ring, and I knew that I had to run down and pick up the phone because it was probably for me, and um, but he was just so persistent, in the recruiting process, and that stood out too. I mean, the kids want to feel wanted, and
Yep.
I think I certainly fell into that bucket there of, um, and I also was just drawn to the competition. I knew that we were going to have big recruiting classes. I knew that everybody was going to be talented on the roster, um, and I was seeking that too. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean and I saw like kind of the record, your team's record for the time that you were there was
yeah,
extremely impressive, and
yeah,
you went there to win and you won a lot, that's for
yeah,
sure,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and it's funny because you know I, that was already established. I think the expectation was the standard was like, hey, you're going to continue to do this every year now, and now as a coach, I'm on like the front end of that, right?
Mm,
We're
right.
trying to figure out, okay, how can we establish that standard of excellence that Coach Podbelski had, and that he did for us to get to a point where that is the standard every year of excellence, and I can try to recruit the kids that were like me that were seeking that. I want to be at a place where I know that that's going to be the expectation every year, and that's what we're trying to do, um, and I think we're a few years away from that, but yeah,
So we'll definitely unpack some of the Vassar stuff as we get there.
yeah.
Was it during college that you realized you wanted to be in college baseball coaching? Did you graduate and go, well, let's see. I don't know what I want to do now. Hey, I do want to do baseball. When did that spark enter your mind?
Yeah, I honestly think it was later in my time at Wheaton. I think I knew I would love to coach. My dad coached for 42 years, high school baseball in my hometown. My mom had coached, and then obviously my brother is a hockey coach. My sister's a field hockey coach.
Jeez, wow,
So it was
yeah.
like I felt like, okay, I know that I would like to do this. But I was like, I got an economics degree, and I want to make sure that that's what I don't want to do too.
Right. Right.
And so
Right.
I got into sales, and um, I was at a smaller company that was involved in athletics, but and they were awesome, but it just wasn't like the sales. It wasn't for me, and so um, my brother is in admissions and head hockey coach at St. George's now, but he's been in a couple of different prep schools. So I tried the prep school thing, and I loved it, and I was like, okay, I want to coach. I just I want to do it at a higher level, and
Right.
I want to get to experience that. Um, but that's really when, a couple years out, that's when I really knew, okay, this is what I want to do. And this I want to try to do it. And, hard to get into and but I wanted to do everything I could to try to get into it.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So obviously the family is heavily into coaching,
Yeah.
and then you go, all right, let me try this business route.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't any fun. All right, so I'm going to do what feels much more natural.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even that, I think that was scary, and I think like probably most coaches, I mean, you know, if you're getting paid, it's minimal starting out. And I felt very lucky. I left. I was at Cardigan Mountain School, prep school, and I left a full-time job to just go work 10 different ACC and SEC camps over the course of a summer.
Hmm.
And I was gonna pretty much primarily live out of the back of my car. And um, I was at Mississippi State. I worked the camp for a week. The next week I was at Ole Miss, and that's when I got a call from 𝐬𝐿𝐾, who at the time was the head coach at Notre Dame. And it was through Jesse Woods, but that's I was very lucky to get that opportunity at the age that I was at with no experience, that I really had. Um, and but it was a really small amount of money, and I had to do lessons and had to grind, had to figure out how to do all of those sorts of things just to survive and to live. So there was still so much uncertainty, whether or not I felt like whether or not I could make it, whether or not I could actually do this for a living.
Yeah, it's funny. There's so many themes that come about as I hear what you're saying compared to other people I've had
Yeah,
on. Many people have worked those camps all over the place, right?
yeah,
And like it's a great way to network and coach some baseball and make some money. And right, you're living out of your car, you're living in a dorm and you're going camp to camp. It's
yeah,
it's really interesting. And then the other thing is, so how did that so Jesse was a help to connect you with Mick?
yeah, yeah. And I would say it started with Coach Podbelski,
Okay.
and really he was the bridge for Jesse and I. Jesse had recruited me to Wheaton, and Jesse left for Boston College about a month before I got to campus. So we never actually crossed paths,
Yep.
Um, but Coach Podbelski knew that I wanted to coach, and um, Jesse had, I think, reached out and said, "Hey, we've created this opportunity, director of baseball operations. If you know of anybody, let me know." And like any of us Wheaton guys, I think we love the other Wheaton guys and we want to try to help them. Um, so I had some conversations with Jesse, but Jesse really, I think, um, stuck his neck out for me with Coach Aoki, and I think Mick was looking for a relatively smooth, easier process to try to get somebody on board
Right.
really quickly.
Right.
It just kind of worked out. But yeah, Jesse and Coach Podbelski were the people that really got me that opportunity.
And two questions about Notre Dame. One was Chuck Ristano there at that
Oh
point?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
So Chuck has been on here. Jesse Woods has been on
Yeah.
here. Yeah, yeah. So Chuck
Yeah.
is he's awesome.
Yeah. And I'll say this. I mean, I think aside from just Notre Dame being Notre Dame and how awesome that place is, and then just the baseball side of it, the ACC and all that, and just getting exposed to that. Um, I, I was just really lucky to have Jesse and Chuck, because and Adam Pavkovich, who was there. Just the three of them, um, I just learned so much, and those guys were so willing to let me into everything that they were doing, and I got to see, hey, if you want to be successful, this is how you have to do it. and this is how you have to treat people. And the relationships that those guys had, I still am like in awe of how they were able to have relationships with so many different people. And that's why they're really good recruiters. They work
Yep.
hard and they have unbelievable relationships, and but just for me in the seat that I had to be able to watch that every day. And I just those guys were awesome and they treated me so well.
So a couple things about Notre Dame. I went out to Notre Dame. Speaking of camps, like in the mid 90s when Paul
Yeah.
Maneri was the head coach
Yeah.
out there. And then back a few years later with some buddies for a football game and walked around, saw facilities. I mean, Notre Dame is a place that just does everything with excellence. Like
Yeah.
everything that's done.
Yep.
Well, that must have been a pretty wild first job, really, at the college level to
Yeah.
be at a place with those people at that institution. It must have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was in the very best ways. It was like a rude awakening, and
Right.
because I had only been exposed to New England Northeast Division III college baseball, and um, to go there and be exposed to ACC baseball, but also just in general everything that happens, behind closed doors to run a bit college baseball program. I mean, you don't know when you're playing. You have no idea what goes on,
Right.
and then to just get thrown into it. And I think Mick was very much a believer of, he didn't want to baby me. He wanted to kind of put my feet to the fire and say, hey, you gotta figure it out and you gotta figure it out fast. And I'm grateful for that because I had to learn
Yeah.
and I got exposed to a lot. So and so Notre Dame just in totality was just an unbelievable experience for all those things. But also like I watched them play Syracuse in football on Saturday, and I reflect on every home Saturday we had probably 8 to 10 recruits and their families on campus, and we were on the sideline. And how cool is that you're right there as the football team's running out, and just to reflect on that and feel like, man, that's such a cool experience that I got to have, and it was pretty awesome.
That's really neat. From there, you went on to Northwestern, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Um, was that now, correct me if I'm wrong, you were really more baseball ops, if you will, at Notre
Yep.
Dame. When
Yep.
you went to Northwestern, now you're I know you were doing camp stuff too, but you're a full-time coach, or at least
Yeah.
coach part of the coaching staff.
Yeah. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
an assistant. Yeah. And so I handled our infielders and then, assisted with the hitters um, I mean, that was an awesome experience too. Like, again, just, I was so lucky. Spencer Allen, is the head coach, and um, I was part of his first staff going there. And Spence is an awesome baseball guy, but just like the best of best human beings.
Mm.
And so it was great to be there with him and just to learn and again just be able to watch and from him and who I thought was doing it at a really high level. And but Northwestern's an awesome place. And my wife went to school there. We watched yesterday. They just won a national championship in field hockey.
Mm.
And like we watched it. We really enjoyed our time there, and we still try and support as much as we can. And so it was a really good experience to be there.
It's one of those campuses I mean, not everyone could get to every campus. I've been to a lot
Yeah.
of places. Never been to Northwestern, never been to the baseball field. The place is pretty special though, huh?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if you're ever in Chicago, you should try and go. It's right on Lake Michigan. It
Mm.
is gorgeous. The new athletic facility that they built right on the water there is phenomenal,
Mm.
and it is top tier. And the baseball facility too is really good, especially for I think what they need.
Yeah.
Um and um and so it's a really cool place. And Chicago's an awesome city,
Of
and
course. Yes, no question about that.
and they're just north of the city, so they're really close, but they're not actually in the city. And
Right, right.
um, but yeah, and then obviously just a tremendous school.
Yep.
So yeah,
I know during that time you also coached summer league. You coached Brockton for at
yeah,
least the season.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did that for one summer and managed the Rocks, and um, that was awesome. And my oldest daughter, I think at the time she was maybe one. And so I knew like, hey, if I was gonna do it, that was the time to do it. And I looked around it seemed like a lot of other coaches had some of that experience on their resume and they had done that. And um, I felt like it would be a good opportunity for me to make some decisions and make some good ones, make some bad ones,
Right.
and and learn from both. And um, but that the Futures League is awesome,
It is.
And when Chris English owned the Rocks, they just did such a good job with like fan engagement. It was just cool. It was a different experience. You felt like you're in minor league baseball, and um, and so that was awesome.
Now, I know the next coaching job you were at Colby, but I don't know if this was simultaneous or in between. You were scouting slash video with the Blue Jays.
Yeah. So I went from Northwestern and then I did that with the Blue Jays for a year.
You did, okay.
Yep. And again, like just super lucky to have had that opportunity. In my role, I covered the southeast part of the US, which is such a dense area just in any year for baseball talent.
Yep.
Um, but in 2018 for that draft year too, a lot of the top 10 rounders were they were coming from the southeast, and I think Cali was down a little bit. So it was just an awesome time to be there. I tried to see top 10 rounders
Hmm.
essentially. Um, and after the draft, I my role was kind of a hybrid role. So after the draft, I slid into player development, and so I got to be exposed to a lot of things they were doing in player development that I believe in that we do here,
Hmm.
and so that was just an awesome experience, and I ultimately um, I loved it. I learned so much, but I was looking at my 1.5 year old, 2 year old, thinking. Um, I don't know that I'm fulfilling, what I really want, which is to be the very best dad that I can be.
Hmm.
And I was still very close with Jesse from our time at Notre Dame. And Jesse got the job at Colby. And he said, hey, I have a full-time assistant and, would love obviously for you to come with me and let's do this. And this program is going to take two of us, three of us, four of us. It's going to take a lot. So, to get it to where we would want it to be. And um, so my wife and I were like, the opportunity back in New England, um, and for me to give myself a chance to be what I felt like could be a better dad. It was I jumped at that, and to be with Jesse, and
Yep.
I knew like I was going to learn so much from Jesse, so that was a no brainer.
And it seems to me Colby's another place I have not been to, but talk to Jesse, know
Yeah,
recruits that I've helped go there, know some kids that play other sports. That's a school that also has some first class. They do things first class facilities. Like that place is really awesome.
yeah, it is, and I always felt like it started from the top with their president. David Green I think he very much believes in the value that athletics can play in the student experience, and it shows. It
Yeah.
shows in their facilities across the board. I mean, baseball, it's great, but just across the board. And I mean, I wish I could still watch hockey games there. Like it's essentially a Division I hockey facility.
Right.
Um, and so it was great to be there, and we needed some of that stuff to get that program moving in the direction that in a positive direction that we wanted to go in, and to get it to where it is today. And but I'm definitely I was there for 4 years. I'm very proud of what we did, and what they continue to do, and as a program. And if we ever play them, I hope we beat them. But otherwise, I'm probably the biggest fan of Jesse in general, but of Colby baseball.
Yeah, it's funny. Dealing with all the different coaches that I do with at all the different levels, whether it's in my recruiting piece or whether it's on these podcasts.
Yeah,
Um, there's something if I was to, and I never coached once. No, not when I played Division III, but never coached at that level.
yeah,
Boy, it seems like a level where you can really impact kids, coach good athletes, but you actually do have a little work-life balance. You're still working your butt off, but boy,
Yeah,
I know that a lot of these Division I coaches seem really stressed a
yeah,
lot. It's a lot of
yeah,
pressure and they're working all the time. So it's like back to your point where you made this decision with a young family
yeah.
and it seems like that's a great place to be with a young family.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I certainly
Yeah.
believe that. I always, think back to because the in it's trickled down to Division 3, but really Division 1 athletics, you just see coaches the carousel
Yeah.
of hiring and firing and I mean, after my first year at Notre Dame, I think we were really concerned, that we probably had 1 year left.
Mhm.
And my first year was our for the school first year in the ACC, and we didn't do well. And um, thankfully, Jesse and Chuck had an unbelievable freshman class that came in that next year, and I think we all kind of jumped on their backs, and we were the 3 seed in the ACC, and we were the 2 seed in a regional, and had an unbelievable year, and um, but like between those 2 years, I mean, I got early on a really good dose of like it's probably it,
Wow. Yeah.
and I think most of the other guys on the staff, like they had other experiences too that they're gonna be fine. They're gonna land on their feet. And I was like, I don't know.
Right.
I might be calling my dad, and saying, "Hey, can I have a job?" And I mean, I think we were preparing for that. My wife at the time was my girlfriend, and she had moved out to South Bend, and you feel those pressures
Right.
I'm impacting other people's lives here, and obviously that didn't happen. Um, but that's a reality for a lot of people. And I certainly don't take it for granted. I get to be an assistant for my daughter's 10U, travel hockey team, right?
Right.
And
Right.
we have a tournament in Connecticut this weekend. Like I get to do that,
Right.
which is awesome. And I don't know if I was still at Notre Dame Northwestern, I don't think I am,
Right. Right.
able,
Agreed.
able to do that. And um, that's not a bad thing, um, but I love to be able to do that,
Yeah, that's
to
great.
have that balance.
After Colby, then you took the head coaching job at Gordon.
Yep.
Um, First question would be, what were the, do you remember some of the learning curves now running your own? Obviously at Brockton you were, but now you're in college with your first
Yeah.
coaching job. And at this point, with all these coaches you coached with, obviously the baseball piece probably is the easy part, like going, hey, I know how to coach kids and run practice. Was there much that you had to learn on the administrative side, or did you feel like the other roles you had were prepped you for that?
Yeah, the administrative side I was totally good with. I think on the field totally good with. Um it was it was you are the person managing the 30 to 40 personalities on within a program. And um I felt like when I got to Gordon, it was very much like when we got to Colby of we were trying to change a culture and
Mm,
create a winning culture and trying to change behaviors is what we were trying to do. And um it's easy, I think, when you're an assistant. I'll joke around with Jesse a lot how I would always be like, "Oh yeah, we should do that. You should do that. Go ahead." And because you don't have to deal directly with the ramifications of, if it's not the right decision, it doesn't really matter, right? Um, but when it is you and you are the head coach, it does matter, and it
mm,
matters a lot, and it can impact relationships and everything moving forward. So I think that was something that for me was very different, very, very different. And Gordon was a place that just there hadn't been a lot of, just on field success and um so there were so many other things I felt like that we were focused on. Recruiting was obviously a big part and trying to expand the roster and get talent and um but even little things that I hadn't really dealt with as much. I had been at some phenomenal schools, but in some ways, getting the kids to go to class, and I hadn't
mm.
experienced that as a coach at the places I had been at.
Right.
And So those were new things for me that I 100% took for granted at some of the other places I had been at.
Yeah, that's interesting. So to recap what I just heard is like, hey, the administrative piece I got, the on-field piece, it's dealing with culture slash all the different kids and personalities, right? Like you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this kid's not going to class. That's my problem now,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah,
Yep.
that's
100%.
very interesting. Obviously, then after that, you get the job at Vassar where you are now. I know a ton about Vassar, but let's start with, let's say people watching, listening don't know much about Vassar. So can you kind of give a little overview on the college itself, and then talk a little bit about just about the baseball program?
Yeah, so we're located in Poughkeepsie, New York. So we're about an hour and a half northwest of New York City. Poughkeepsie it's a small city. It's 50,000 people. Um, we also have in Poughkeepsie is Marist, now Marist
Yep.
University. I know
Right.
you're very familiar with Marist, and and so we have the two of us, and um, we are an elite academic liberal arts institution. And I think we one thing that I really appreciate about Vassar is we won't veer away from who we are and what we believe, um, and whether that's the type of students that we bring in, or the education that that we're able to serve for our students, or even on the athletic side. We very much are trending in an unbelievably positive direction, and we're not going to shy away from telling people that we want to excel on the field and we want to do it academically, and we're never going to um, the athletics is never going to take away from the academics. But I do think that in talking to others that have been here, there's been a pretty good shift, really, since I think our current athletic director, Michelle Walsh, since she has been here for the last 9 years of athletics is a priority. And we just finished the fall, and um, women's soccer, field hockey won our conference. Men's soccer lost in the conference championship. They won it last year. Like, you're seeing team sport, right, have success and do it at a really high level. And our winter programs have been really strong the last handful of years, and we hope and expect them to do that again. And and certainly hope we can get there in the spring, to that point. But I do think that um, people are seeing a big shift in Vassar. I think a little bit more probably like a NESCAC, where athletics is becoming more of a priority, because it absolutely can be a tremendous part of the student experience, and it doesn't have to take a backseat to the academic experience. And the academic experience can be what it is, and the athletic experience can match that.
This may be a weird question, but I've kind of wanted to know this. If I was to say to you, I have a really good kid
Yeah.
that I think is a fit for Vassar, would you rather see his video first, like hear about him as a player, and then dig into the academics, or would you rather see the transcript board scores first and go, okay, this is a student we can, potentially get in. Now let me find, I know it's ultimately a combination of both, but
Yeah.
to you, where do you kind of start? Do you start, let's say for someone you don't know, do you want to hear about them as a baseball player or as a student first?
Yeah, student.
Student.
Yeah. And I think our admissions office it will not budge,
Mm.
and they shouldn't. Um, and I think it is very challenging, to be admitted to Vassar, and they're a great partner with us. We have we have supports that we have, and um, but you have to be an elite student. And um, so for me, that's why it always starts with it's the transcript. The test score, it matters, but um, not nearly as much. We are test optional. The rigor is unbelievably important. It's the rigor compared to the rigor offered and
Right.
being able to have those two, line up pretty well. We want to feel like kids that come to Vassar have challenged themselves at their high schools. Um, and they need to be performing amongst the peers at their current high schools. They need to be performing of the best that school offers. And so, that's why I say like pretty quickly the academic piece. And I've never had to dive into transcripts the way that and I felt like coming here, I had been at really good schools, and
Yeah,
I
you have.
was. Um, but here, I think the head coaches at Vassar um, have to really dive into transcripts and school profiles much more than I think. Certainly, I'll just speak at places that I've been, um, and that's a big part of it. It's a really big part of it.
That was actually, you just mentioned, I was actually going to ask you that as the next question. And again, if I ask you anything that's specific to Vassar, you're not comfortable, really, because some of this stuff,
Yeah.
I don't want to make sure I don't want to make anything uncomfortable. But I was going to ask you how much the school matters. So could you, to someone who is not familiar with what the school profile is and means, could you please explain that?
Yeah, so for us, the way we use it is we want to know, yeah, the strength of the school, but what types of courses and the strength of the courses that are offered at that high school, and knowing what the school offers, we can then say, okay, this is what this student has taken, this is what this student is planning to take, right? And then we get an understanding of truly the rigor that student has on their transcript. If a school offers 80 APs and the student has taken three of them, well, that's different than the school offering five APs and the student has taken three of them, right?
Right.
And or if it's an IB school, and some schools have gone away from APs, and the grading scale can be different dependent on the school, and the school profile has all of that in there. And so again, like at other places, we would quickly look at the school profile, but we have to dive into it here, and we have to get a really good understanding of the school profile. Um, and and so that's been something that I've tried to work really hard to really I think um, increase my understanding of school profiles.
Would it be safe to say, and I know you can't, not knowing more details, but if there's a kid that has a true 4.0 GPA with, let's just to make it a clear-cut case, no APs, right? Maybe even very few honors courses, and a kid with a 3.7 with a heavy AP and honors courses at the same school, would it be safe to say that the Vassar admissions is going to much more prefer the kid that's taken the challenging courses?
Yes. We also value, I think some other schools do this, but we value the core unweighted GPA too.
Okay.
Right. So essentially, I look at it as we're gonna kind of strip the fat away from the transcript. The elective courses, any sort of weighting, then it almost makes it the same for everybody that you're going to evaluate.
Right.
And so there are certain benchmarks that we want to see in terms of the core unweighted GPA, right? Certain GPAs with that core unweighted that we need to know that there is. So we recalculate. That's another thing that we do as coaches. We recalculate that core unweighted GPA, and I had never done that before, and so um, I think probably yes, the kid with the rigor and the 3.7, I think is likely to be more favorable than someone that's a 4.0 and hasn't challenged themselves. Um, the funny thing is, I think we still really we want the kid that has challenged themselves that has a very high
Right.
GPA,
Right.
the very high unweighted, and that's why like a lot of the showcases or even tournament packets you look through, typically you get the weighted GPA,
Right.
and I do think for a lot of schools that's great, and I always look and I'm like, all right, so what do I think that probably is unweighted, and um, because that's really what we care about.
So would it be safe to say that you're almost the first line of admissions. Like, for example, not that you're making decisions, but you could look at a transcript and go, okay, I see enough to move it on to the pre-read or admissions process.
Yeah,
Or, hey, I'm not they're going to laugh at me, or, they're going to tell me, what are you doing if I send this one in? So, like,
yeah.
is that fair to say you're the first one that determines whether this is good enough to move on?
Yeah. Yep, 100%.
Okay.
And we have a certain amount of early reads and the two recruiting classes I've had, the 2025s and then now the 2026s, with the early reads, we really only had I think in 2025 there was a decent amount of reads that came back and I was like, what is going on? And as I've tried to learn and develop and just understand, what are our institutional priorities and how can we recruit kids that are fulfilling that? Um, we really only had one this year where I was really shocked,
Uh,
and so I do think we're starting to get a better understanding of being able to take a transcript and a school profile, and if there is a great test score involved, obviously that too, and just and look at the whole academic resume and have a pretty good understanding of where we think, um, in terms of support that a prospective student athlete, what they would need. Um, and that's when we will obviously engage with admissions,
yeah.
because, we don't want to waste their time.
I was gonna say, are you and the other coaches in a way trained on some of this stuff? Do they sit you down as coaches and say, here's how to read transcripts, here like, is that sort of, you got to learn amongst going to other coaches, or is there any formal process of saying, here's how to handle this stuff? Because it seems like this is a learning curve.
It is. I'm grateful, to be honest, that at my 4 years at Colby, Jesse gave me a lot of responsibility with it.
Right,
And I'm so grateful for that. I do feel like, being a newer coach at Vassar, I felt like it gave me a leg up.
right.
And um, but it's 100%. I think I've learned the most from the other coaches, from their successes and failures in the process here. Um, and like anywhere, there's certain things we will favor from an admission standpoint, and certain things we won't. And so just getting an understanding of what those are, and maybe not having to learn in a recruiting cycle, but learn directly from other coaches and that have already gone through it. But they have absolutely, it's been through other coaches.
Okay. Are you frustrated at all by the rigor needed, or is that a blessing in a way to go, hey, instead of me recruiting the whole world or the whole kids, I'll go to this showcase or this tournament, and I know I'm going to lock into the 10 kids that have the act, like, so I don't know if I'm asking that question right. Is the
Yeah.
limitation frustrating at times, or is it a blessing to say, hey, I'm just going to narrow down what I'm looking for?
Yeah, I haven't, other than Gordon, I haven't really experienced anything other than that, and of course, Notre Dame and Northwestern a little bit different, very high academic institutions, but still they're going to have a little bit more, wiggle room of
Right.
course for the athletics. Um, but Colby was still similar, in terms of going to an event and having to be really, micro focused on a select few kids. And I think I learned that at schools like this, you have to do your work on the front end, and you can't just show up and watch players and say I like, and because you've very very likely wasted all of your time.
Good point.
And so I think I don't again I don't really know what it's like to show up to a game unprepared, of understanding, the academic resumes of kids. And um, so, but I also know that, one thing I just appreciate is the admissions office here just, I think does such a good job identifying the kids that can excel here. That, last year in the fall, our team GPA was a 3.72.
Wow.
And in the spring, it was a 3.71.
Wow.
And so I think, as challenging as it can be at times, right? For a kid to be admitted to any high academic institution, but here it is. I think last year it kind of showed me, okay, there's a reason for why they're doing what they do, right? Admissions knows what they're doing,
Right, right.
and I think that you know they have and will continue to just identify the kids that can be successful here. Because I think at Vassar to have a team GPA that high is, it's ridiculous in my mind.
Yeah,
And
I would agree.
so um, you know, but yeah.
So I want to just unpack one thing. I totally got what you said, but there may be some people listening that don't understand it. And what you were saying is you're not going to go to some tournament with 100 teams playing at Diamond Nation and just go watch random kids that are crushing balls and great defense and can throw 88 and then find out the baseball stuff first and then they go, hold on, this kid's got a 2.6. What am I? You're going to
Yeah.
go in there saying, hey, I've earmarked these 10 kids at this tournament that are in the ballpark of Vassar grades. Now I'm going to say, are these kids that fit us baseball wise? So that's what you mean by
Yes.
at the front end, you're doing your homework.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Two other things on the recruiting, and then we'll get back to the little coaching thing. Um, Obviously, you get certain kids that are just looking for and are a perfect fit for Vassar. That's what they're looking for. And obviously, if they're a match academically and baseball wise, they become recruits. When you are competing, the kids that are coming to you that choose Vassar that started out with a list of 10, 12 schools, are the schools that they're looking at, is it Ivies that they start with? Is it NESCACs? Is it the Emory's and Hopkins and the Wash U's? Like, I guess I'm sort of asking the kids that ultimately pick Vassar, if they didn't earmark that type of exact school to start with, are those kids that were looking at those pool of schools that I mentioned?
Yeah, 100%. It's either a kid I think that early in the recruiting process is is probably getting some interest from the Ivy League schools, and as that process starts to, filter that maybe they kind of reset their focus and realize, okay, I think I'm probably going to end up at a Division 3, and hopefully we're sitting there with our hands up, waiting and depending on the timing of it. And then absolutely for Division 3s, it's definitely the NESCACs. It is Hopkins. It's Swarthmore is
Yeah, Swath. Yep.
it's definitely one that we cross paths with
Yep.
a lot. And I can't remember who else you mentioned, but
Emory, which is down
yep,
south, but
yep,
Wash
and
U.
yep,
Yeah. Yep.
yep, and yep, absolutely. And um, and so we want to feel like those are, if we're recruiting kids that I know are being recruited by those schools, you feel like, hey, you're going up against good programs, which I feel like is
You want.
what you want.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The last question, recruiting wise, it could be more coaching. Is there a roster size that Vassar says the team has to be within, or do you have your own personal, hey, I've done this long enough. This is the roster size that I want. How do you manage the roster size, basically?
Yeah, it's a 35 is a loose, it's sort of a loose number. I think it's where our administration would love for us to be the top. Um, right now we're at 28, and that's with 13 freshmen. So 45% of our roster are freshmen, which is my first class, um, and that's because we had 13 seniors last year. So it was a one for one trade-off, and so we didn't. I don't think we could have, but we didn't want to also make it more than 13.
It makes sense. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and um so this year we're at 28, and next year hopefully in a month here we're getting all good news, but we should have 8 coming in, and we're going to graduate 5. So the roster will grow by 3, and then with the 2027 class, we'll graduate 6, and we'll bring in 8 or 9. And so we'll kind of, I think, a little bit more organically, we're going to be at or close to 35. And if we ever had to go over, we could do that, but we really don't want to. We want to try to stay right there, and I think that's a pretty fair number,
Yeah.
in my mind.
And I'm assuming I didn't ask you because I'm going to assume you're going to, you know, think what I'm thinking. The portal transferring, getting kids from transferring in is non-existent almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was I
Yeah.
assumed. Yeah.
And I do think, I think there'll probably be a time at some point where, it's going to work out for one kid, for us. And I think my athletic director said in her 9 years, I think that there's been one per year in term for athletics
For all sports.
for all of the sports. Yep.
Right. Right.
And so, um, I'm sure at some point maybe our number will get called, but it's just it's not it's not a factor.
Yeah.
And hopefully a big part of that is because we're not losing kids, right? And
Right.
like kids are enjoying their experience and they want
But
to
I
be.
was even thinking of along the lines of, hey, there's a kid you love. You know
Yeah,
he's a great fit. He chooses Yale. After a year or two, he's like, I'm never going to play here. I want a similar education. Coach, like, and maybe he doesn't, he's not playing there, but he's good.
yeah,
I'm curious if a situation like that would happen. But obviously, that's probably not your primary. You'd rather get a kid straight from high school and have him 4 years.
yeah. It's not the primary, and we would certainly, whatever we could to kind of kick the tires on that type of situation. I think you have to.
Right, right.
But it's just, it can't be where, we kind
Yeah,
of,
that's not your standard business is
yeah,
to get
right.
five
Right.
Ivy League transfers in a year. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
got
And that's crazy because if, sometimes you're in a setting where you're with schools that aren't similar type of institutions and and they're what they do in recruiting is so different, right? Because of the portal and but
True.
it's, I would say like for us, that world is so foreign.
Yeah, which is, I think, a good thing, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, last question is, and this is sometimes I prep coaches with this, sometimes I don't, but I think you'll be good on it. It's not that tricky, but I always like to ask, is there anything this far into your career that if you look back at Tad Skelley when he was a sophomore, a junior in high school, or, and could give your old self advice, or if there's a sophomore or junior in high school watching this now who so desperately wants to get the best out of themselves and play in college, is there any one or two things you think are key that a kid at that age should be doing to reach their goal of playing college baseball?
Yeah. I think it's so hard for kids. Now, I think in general at that age, but to try to be present and
Mm.
enjoy it. I'm, and I think I did, but I would love to go do it again. And I would love to go back to high school and be a three-sport athlete and not be so consumed with what's next
Oof.
and like the whatever it is, whether it's societal pressures or if it was internal pressures, but like just the constant trying to figure out how to get to that next, and it's easy to say now, it's easy to be Monday morning quarterback, but I think like, truly truly just being in the moment, and appreciating what you have and certainly it just, back to how we started the conversation of, three sport athletes, but um, I would love to go back and be able to play all three sports again and just go through that process.
That might be the best answer anyone's given at that. And I'm not kidding because I deal with kids that are so stressed
Yeah.
because of what you said.
Yeah.
Everything's in the future. I got to get recruited. I
Yep.
got to get this. I got to get that. And
Yep.
it does take away from your present moment.
Yep.
Um, and it is not easy. If you and I were high school sophomores and juniors now, we'd be feeling the pressure to commit and all
Yep.
this stuff. But
Yep.
you're right. It is smart to just be where your feet are,
Yeah.
lock in every day,
Yep.
and usually things do work out
Yeah.
the way they're supposed to. So
Yep.
I really love that.
Yep.
Tad, you're the man. I so appreciate your time.
Yeah.
This is great to connect. Vassar's lucky to have you. I think
Thank you.
you're gonna do great there, and I'm so glad you came on here, buddy.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I
Uh,
appreciate it.
all right, buddy. Thank you all so much for listening to today's episode of the Game Plan podcast by College Baseball Advisors. Again, I'm your host, Wayne Mazzoni, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Tad Skelley, head baseball coach at Vassar College. I'd like to remind you that this podcast is made possible through the sponsorship of the World Baseball Coaches Convention, which takes place at the Mohegan Sun Casino January 15th to 17th, 2026. It's in its 23rd year as an event at that location, has really grown. It's an awesome place to listen to speakers, to ask them questions outside of those formal presentations. You could also be in the hallways and hear great baseball people talk shop. It really gets the baseball juices flowing at an awesome location. If you've never been to the Mohegan Sun Casino, you're certainly missing out. And of course, the space for this convention is awesome, and the vendor setup is really great as well. So for more information and to register, please visit baseballcoachesclinic.com. Again, thank you for listening to today's episode, and we'll see you on our future broadcast. Thank you.